The question we are going to discuss is: define enclosed space, give examples of enclosed spaces on ships. What is the procedure for an enclosed space entry? Describe the same. What type of permit is required for entry into enclosed spaces and how is it issued? What is its validity? Let's start with the first part of the question. Define enclosed space, give examples of enclosed spaces on ships. An enclosed space is a space which is not designed for continuous worker occupancy and has either or both of the following characteristics. Limited openings for entry and exit. Inadequate ventilation. The atmosphere in any enclosed space may be oxygen deficient or oxygen enriched and or contain flammable and or toxic gases or vapors. Such unsafe atmospheres create a risk of death or serious injury. These are just a few examples of enclosed spaces. Cargo holds, pipe tunnels, ballast tanks, pump rooms, peak tanks, void spaces, bunker tanks, cofferdams, freshwater tanks, chain lockers, battery lockers, bottom tanks, paint or chemical lockers, boiler furnaces, engine crankcases. Let's move to the next part of the question. What is the procedure for an enclosed space entry? Describe the same. Authorization for entry? No person should enter an enclosed space without the express authorization of the master or a nominated responsible person. Entry into an enclosed space must be a planned process requiring proper precautions. An entry permit or permit to work system or a similar alternative must be used. All crew should be aware of this system. General precautions? All enclosed space access doors, hatches or manholes should be secured against inadvertent entry. It is recommended that all enclosed spaces are highlighted as being hazardous and requiring an entry permit before entering. This can be done using signs and warning notices. An enclosed space that has its access door hatch open to allow for ventilation should be protected to prevent access, using barriers, warning signs or personnel stationed at the entrance. Only trained personnel should be engaged in the duties associated with enclosed space entry. Ship's crews with first aid and rescue duties should be drilled in enclosed space emergencies. As a minimum, training should include hazards likely to be faced during an enclosed space entry. Recognition of the signs of adverse health effects caused by exposure to the potential hazards. Knowledge of personal protective equipment required for entry. All equipment must be in good working condition and checked before entry. Ventilation. Before any enclosed space is entered, it should be properly ventilated by opening as many access points as possible. Ventilation should be continuous, effective and commensurate with the size, configuration and location of the space. Natural ventilation may be acceptable in some circumstances, example where a small space opens up directly to fresh air. However, most enclosed spaces will require mechanical ventilation. Some spaces will be fitted with fixed ventilation systems, such as holes and pump houses. Alternatively, a large diameter ventilation hose in good condition can be attached to a fan and lowered into the enclosed space. The air intake of the hose should be placed in an area that will draw in fresh air only. No space should be entered until it has been properly ventilated and the atmosphere tested. Testing the atmosphere. The atmosphere testing equipment must have manufacturer's operating instructions available. Be kept in a known, safe location, in good order and properly calibrated. Be serviced by manufacturer's recommendations. Have calibration and service records maintained. Have the suitable capability to measure levels of oxygen, flammable vapors, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide and toxic gases appropriate for the ship's trade. For entry purposes, steady readings of all the following should be obtained. 21% oxygen by volume by oxygen content meter. Not more than 1% of lower flammable limit, LFL, on a combustible gas indicator if there is potential for flammable gases or vapors. Not more than 50% of the occupational exposure limit, OEL, of any toxic gases or vapors. On entry, ensure you have a person assigned on standby for each entry. The standby person should be equipped with rescue equipment including self-contained breathing apparatus and radio. Wear protective clothing and boots. The standby person should ensure they maintain radio contact with the bridge or engine control room, or in port with someone who can help in case of emergency. Ensure the space is well ventilated. Ventilation should continue during the period that the space is occupied and during temporary breaks. If things go wrong, if you see someone lying motionless, do not rush to carry out a rescue by yourself. An unplanned rescue is likely to end in tragedy as personnel rush into lethal atmospheres under the misconception that they will be able to save colleagues. Stop and think, why are they unconscious? Could this be an enclosed space? Should an emergency occur, the general or crew alarm should be sounded so that backup is immediately available to the rescue team. Never enter the space before help has arrived and a plan for rescue confirmed. Rescue. Do not enter the space without the authorization of the master or a nominated responsible person. Do not enter the space without testing the atmosphere. Let's move to the last part of the question. What type of permit is required for entry into enclosed spaces and how is it issued? What is its validity? Prior to allowing personnel to enter an enclosed space, an entry permit should be issued. It is recommended that the permit should be signed by the master or a designated officer with sufficient knowledge and experience of the procedures requiring compliance. The entry permit should contain a clear indication as to its maximum period of validity, which should not exceed 8 hours. It should also describe the maximum permitted time between testing of the atmosphere and entry of personnel into the space. A single permit for entry into more than one enclosed space may be issued as defined in the company's SMS. However, this should only be applicable for entry to cargo tanks. It is essential to ensure that while personnel are within an enclosed space, the levels of oxygen and any contaminants are regularly checked, and that personnel entering a space use multigas detectors, and that the levels remain within safe limits. If there is any doubt regarding the oxygen level or the presence of toxic or flammable gases, the space should be immediately evacuated. A condition of the entry permit should require that if the enclosed space is vacated for any reason, such as for refreshment or a meal break, ventilation should be continued during the break and the atmosphere of the enclosed space should be fully retested prior to re-entry.